Welcome to another podcast episode. We are talking again to Mr. David. He's the owner of Stay with Dave, property management company out of Los Angeles. We're doing part 2 today of diving into the weeds of an Airbnb operations. So, David, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. We had a great conversation on the first one, and love talking to you about this wild game.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah, it was fun. And just to recap, last week we really dove into operations. We did the podcast a bit different. Normally, I'm the one asking questions. Dave approached me. He was like, "Hey, man, like I want to ask you some questions." So that's what we did in part 1. If you didn't listen to it, go ahead, listen to it now before you listen to this one. This is part 2. We're going to talk a little bit more about operations, but also we're going to touch on regulations because that's a challenge in the Los Angeles area. But in many markets, it's either a challenge now or it could become a challenge in the future, right? So it's important to stay ahead of the game when it comes to that. But before we dive into it, Dave, give us a recap, man. Like we've known each other like 7 years. You've been in the business for a long time. What's your story? Give us the elevator pitch. Well, let's say a tall building, right? 100 floors. So you got a couple minutes.
Well, I was doing a lot of comedy, stand-up, acting, a bunch of other things, and the short-term rental game fell on my lap about 7.5 years ago. And that's when we met. And I was doing the arbitrage model the entire time. So I had up to 50 arbitrage units, 50. Then when COVID hit, it was the biggest meltdown in tourism history, and had a bunch of issues and problems. And in the next 2 weeks, we're gonna be down to about 15 units, so 15. And now we're looking to build up in the management model instead of the arbitrage model. So we've got all the systems, and we've got the experience, and now we're looking to really move up quickly in management. And then that's where I came back. I was in Legends. What is it? STR Legends?
STR Legends Mastermind. Yeah, you were in Cartagena in Colombia right before COVID hit.
Exactly. Like 3 weeks before COVID hit, I was in STR Masterminds. For some reason, none of us anticipated COVID during our week-long mastermind. Now I've decided to come back and get back to basics, and I'm taking Legends X because this is going to be the first time. I've never managed any units. We've done everything for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to take all of our skills and our customer relations and everything that we love and do it for others. And so I'm starting back at the basics in Legends X.
Yeah.
And I see that you've done management, you own your own stuff. I don't think you guys have done arbitrage, right?
I personally, well, I do arbitrage on a hotel, small hotel, right? In Egypt. Right. Like we rent it and then we re-rent it on Airbnb. Which was actually a pretty good business until COVID hit as well. Yeah. It's picking up now, actually. But there's a kite surfing one. What's that?
Is that the kite surfing one?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we're making money on renting out the rooms, but we're making most of our money by selling kite surf courses and renting out the equipment.
Nice.
But yeah, we rent that thing for like a couple $100 a month. It's kind of crazy. It's like so cheap there in Egypt.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I've never really scaled like any arbitrage business. That's what Eric was doing, right? So when I learned most of that stuff from Eric, just kind of seeing how he built that. But as you know, Eric shifted away from arbitrage quite a while ago, and he focused on management, right?
Right. So you guys are focusing on teaching and management and owning.
Now we're mostly focused on owning, right? Because that's that's it's, I mean, the management model is cool, make some to make some money and learn the business and everything. But I think eventually, if you look at wealth creation, over the last 30 years, real estate's been the biggest wealth creation in the world, right? Anybody who bought real estate like 20, 30 years ago, has done really, really well, or even the last 10 years, I would say. So yeah, I think, our goal is now to create long-term wealth for ourselves. And we believe that the best way to do that is to actually own the assets. So especially with like I'm sure you're aware what the central banks are doing, right? I mean, look at inflation, look at how much money is being created. If that goes on into the future, you don't want to have you want to borrow money and invest it in hard assets.
Right.
At least that's my philosophy.
You don't want to hold on to an asset that's being devalued.
I mean, if you borrow, like if you get a mortgage now, for example, all right, or you find an investor to invest in assets, the money that you owe stays constant, right? You're paying interest, or you're doing a revenue share, like however you set it up. What's going to happen if inflation keeps going the way it's going right now, then what you owe is going to become less and less, but your asset is not going to depreciate, right?
Yeah, and you continue to make money on the asset.
Exactly.
Cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we, obviously we manage to own our own units, right? That we're purchasing. Maybe we'll outsource some of the management in the future, because we're planning to buy like 10 to 20 of these in the next 5 years or so. So
I thought you were going to say in the next 5 months.
Yeah, I don't know if we can scale that fast. So that's the disadvantage of owning, is that it takes a bit longer to to purchase these things versus just signing a lease, right? I mean, you can scale that pretty quickly, as you know. Like I mean, how long did it take you to get those 50 master leases?
Yeah, it took me about 6 years. It took 6 years.
50.
To get to 50, and then it took me only a year to get back down to 15.
It's like confidence. It takes a long time to build, or no, trust. Trust takes a long time to build, but you can lose it very quickly.
Right. And now, I know you were telling me your guys' management company or company as a whole has never had an integrator, like a one operations manager, right?
Yeah, you were asking me about an operations manager, right? So I don't have any experience like really hiring an operational manager like you are doing right now. But I'm familiar. I told you my unit in California. Not in California, in Colombia. My buddy is managing that for me, and I sat in his office for about 2 months when I was down there to work, on my stuff. But I got a pretty close look at, how he operates his business. And what he did was exactly what you're doing. He essentially said, okay, instead of doing, you can't do everything yourself, right? So you got to hire people. Some people, Rebecca, she's built her entire team on virtual assistants, right? But Patrick, who manages my unit, he hired somebody who used to work for Marriott. So there's a lot of experience in hospitality. He was actually on the podcast too. He's an awesome guy. Harold, shout out to Harold.
Harold, okay.
That's right, yeah. And Harold is the operations manager for Patrick, but he's on the ground, right? So you're looking at hiring a virtual operations manager.
Virtual operations manager. Yeah, because there are people like me who have their units, whether they're managing or they're owning, they have it scattered in different places in different cities. So the way I have it right now, and the way I'm looking to build up, is I've got units in different cities and different states. I've got my VAs who are our customer service team. So they take shifts and they work in shifts about 18 to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then we've got our cleaners, where most of them are cleaners and they do maintenance, or their husband and wife team, or somebody does maintenance. And then they do errands as well. But then we also have some cleaners in some cities where we couldn't find the all-in-one package. So they're cleaners, and then we have a list of like 8 handymen. And then we have people that can do errands, and they're very hard to find. Or sometimes the cleaner will do an errand here and there. Those are an issue. The ones that are not all in one, that are not totally invested in that. So those we call our vendors. We have the customer service people and we have the vendors. The customer service people are in Philippines. The vendors are on the ground. None of them are our employees. So we need an integrator. Which is what I'm doing right now, who is in charge of the customer service, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If there's something that's a higher level, taking care of it. I'm constantly checking our inbox threads to see if anything stands out. If I see a guest sending 30 pictures on Airbnb, I know that there's an issue. And I kind of want to like leave town, skip town, but I have to deal with it. So I'm going through that. So, and then also the vendors, they need attention. They need attention. They need to have their job scorecard looked at. They need to talk to a higher level manager person instead of dealing with the customer service department. So I have actually brought on now, and we're training a virtual operations manager who is doing the same task for another company, and is going to be doing it for me as well until we get to a certain amount of units, hopefully through the management model, and then he'll work full-time for us.
Okay, so he's not going to be working full-time right away.
No, he's going to be available for a good number of hours, but he's going to be working for another company where he's managing like 130 of their units.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they've got a bigger staff, but he's the integrator for their company. So
okay. So yeah, that sounds like a good person. Like if he manages 130 units, then that's a lot of experience.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the company?
No, not yet. I mean, I do. I don't want to give it out yet. Yeah.
Because I'm curious. I was like, hey, for 130 units, that might be a good person to to get into our mastermind.
Yeah. They're in another country. I can give it to you off the in person or off the air here. Right now we're still in the training phase, and we're not 100% onboarded yet. So
yeah. What's your process to train this person?
So what we're doing is we're doing the Loom videos that we're going to create together. I've got a 400 article knowledge base that we use to train our customer service people. So we're going through that. We're going through like my day-to-day activities. Through Legends X, one of the best things about Legends X was the job scorecard, where that outlines everything, and it leaves areas for the integrator, for the operations manager to talk about what he thinks would be a success on a monthly basis, so that we're on the same page. And then we have KPIs on there as well. So the KPIs we came up with for the operations manager is a certain median of ratings of a 4.8 or higher for all the units. And then a bunch of other things about on where, just like more like StayWithDave related things in terms of, getting this done on time and making sure that my interactions with the customer service and the vendors is very, very minimal and things like that. But the incentive that we're putting on there is the overall rating score.
Mm-hmm.
So if the overall rating score is 4.8 or higher on a monthly basis, there's going to be an additional bonus incentive, which is really like an idea that I got from Legends X via the job score.
Yeah, those are super powerful. We're actually going into our monthly review meetings. And that's something that I highly recommend, like having that meeting every month with your operations manager. Because it's interesting, like since we started doing this, and we've implemented this in our team a while ago, but we've only recently started doing like the monthly reviews. And it's really interesting to see how that shifts the dynamic within the team. Like even for ourselves, like I have my own monthly review meeting tomorrow. And so like a week, last week or so, I was like, oh, I got to look at those, that area where you put like, what does success next month mean? Right.
Yeah. Are you nervous?
And then I was like, oh, I gotta like up my game on these areas. Cause last time I got like a B+, I want to get an A- or like an A this time, So it's, even though like I'm the owner, the co-founder of the business, it still motivates me to do better. Right.
Who goes over your job scores?
So the way that we have structured it in our educational business, so Eric, myself, and the COO, we all in pairs review each other. So Aaron and I review Eric, Eric and Aaron review me, and me and Eric review Aaron, if that makes sense.
But Aaron is your tech person, right?
Oh, that's our COO.
COO, okay. Yeah, so yeah. You have an operations.
That's for our educational company,
education,
right?
Okay.
We run two businesses now.
Right. So let me ask you this. So you've got, so for Idlewild and the places that you own, and you still manage a few, right? You guys together?
No, so I have a number of my own, right? I own 3 individual units.
Okay.
Like one in Colombia, one in Philippines, one in Thailand.
Okay.
I manage a small hotel in Egypt, but it's small, it's a 5-bedroom villa. It doesn't take that much time. But FreeWild is the first thing that Eric and I actually do together.
Together. I thought that Eric was still managing with you in the US.
In San Diego.
Is he still doing?
Because what happened is, like, when we went all in on this educational business, like, we recognized, like, it's really hard to build 2 businesses at the same time, Yeah. So we decided, like, okay, well, if we're, the only chance that we have to really, really, build this educational business is we got to put our 100% of our focus into it.
Okay.
Right. So that's what we did. And I, like I said, I still had some stuff going on, but I outsourced, most of that. Right. Okay. Like I said, my unit in Colombia is managed by Patrick. Right. Before that, I was more involved in it.
Do you pay Patrick a percentage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. He's like my property manager. He's like what you're.
Oh, okay. So he's doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm his management client.
I see. Okay. So does Eric still have his management business?
No, his partner, took that over
Oh, I see.
About 1.5 years ago or something, when we started building, the mastermind and all of that stuff. Yeah.
That over. Okay. So when you guys build Idlewild up and you're going to have, 5, 10, 15 other places that you own, are you going to have a virtual operations manager like I am?
Yeah, I think one thing we recognize is that it's, people in the type of markets that we are going into, people really look for more of a personal connection. Like if you're in a big city, if you rent an Airbnb in New York, you go into New York for the weekend, you don't really look for that connection. You just want fast internet. You just want to check in, smooth check in.
Yeah.
You just want to have the info. You want to do your thing. You don't have to meet the host. None of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to a small little village in nature, you're looking to disconnect and kind of forget about your, all your worries in your day-to-day life, and get rid of your phone for a weekend and just go back to the basics, like interact with human beings and being in nature. If you're looking for that type of experience, then, I think we need to secure that personal touch.
Okay.
Right. So I think the way that we're going to build it is, I think we're going to have somebody that lives on all of our properties, who's kind of like an innkeeper.
Oh.
And then that person is the host, right? Because right now Eric and I are the host. Right. We're doing everything, right? Because we need to figure everything out. Our market, our guests. We're building the systems and implementing the tech and all that stuff.
And all that. Okay.
But what we're learning is, people who travel for those experiences, they like the personal touch, right? So I think that's how we're going to structure it. Above those, so every property, I think, will have a host who's responsible for that property. But then once we have 5 to 10 of these, what we'll do is we'll hire a general manager who then is responsible for the portfolio.
Okay, so that'll be like your operations manager.
Exactly. So that will be like the general manager that it sounds like you hired.
Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna have like an innkeeper type of person. Okay. Yeah. Somebody who lives in the glamping village.
Yeah, because the properties that we are going after are not individual units, right? Yeah, these are we envision 10 to 15 units, tiny homes per property.
Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna have are you gonna have find special characters like a one-legged woman who is
are you interested or?
No, how a lot of these villages, they have this, the innkeeper is this spooky woman who talks about haunted. This place I've been here for 65 years. This place was haunted. Give you a tour, Yeah.
I'm not sure about the one-legged person.
I am interested. Yeah, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way that we're going to do this, right? But it's, we just started building this. So, things can change, but that's how we're envisioning it. I mean, it's really useful. It's really convenient to have somebody on site, right? Because if there's any guest issues or whatever it is, it's good to have somebody on site. And if we're doing 10 to 15 units per property, then that's not too hard. You basically just reserve one of the units where that person lives, right?
And she's going to be whoever the person who lives there is going to be responsible for the cleaners, the manager of the cleaners and the vendors and the plumbers and all that. But they're not going to be doing the messaging and the reservations. That'll still be your VAs.
Yeah, I think the way I think about it is, we'll do the revenue management, we'll do the maintaining the sites, the listings, all of that stuff. I do think that the standard messages will probably have a VA support on that. But if there's a very specific question coming through, then she would still, or she or he would then answer some messages, right? Very specific questions.
Okay. And
So
then
there would probably be, the listing would probably have a co-host. Either the virtual assistant would be the co-host, or it's one profile, but then the virtual assistant would be in there, and the host would be in there under the same profile. So not sure exactly how we would set that up, but yeah, that's the idea.
Greg, can I ask you a little bit about regulations now?
Yeah, let's talk about regulations for sure.
Yeah, this is something that has really been a bottleneck for me here. And this is basically the situation. And I'm sure like a lot of listeners and everybody I know for a fact, we're all in the same boat. What do property managers in places like Los Angeles do in terms of managing short-term rentals? And I'll tell you the rules of Los Angeles, which a lot of cities have. It basically states that you cannot have a vacation rental unless you claim, or you cannot get a permit for a vacation rental unless you claim that you live in the vacation rental for at least 6 months. So it's really those that live part-time in the vacation rental are the ones that have an actual permit and can operate. So for us as property managers, are we supposed to not, I mean, are our choices limited to those that live in the home for 6 months at a time? Or are we just not supposed to do short-term rental management in regulated cities like this? What does Vacasa do? What do small property managers do? How do we manage vacation rentals in Los Angeles, for example?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good question. Obviously, that's a big challenge. I mean, I think there's a couple decisions that you have to make, right? Number one is, do you want to operate legally, right? Or do you want to operate in the gray zone? That's a choice that you have to make. I operated in the gray zone in Amsterdam for quite a while. Right. I didn't like that very much. I don't really want to do that anymore, because I don't like the idea that, that at any point I could get fined and my guests will get kicked out. The police is going to put a new lock on the door. I don't want to have that type of experience. That's stressful. Thanks to the universe, that never happens. But yeah, that's a decision that you have to make, because some people are comfortable with kind of, being creative and kind of operating, on the edges of what's allowed. And, there's ways that you can go around the rules. Like, for example, in Amsterdam, at some point they had a rule that on Airbnb, you could only rent out for 60 days a year. So what people would do is, like, they would create multiple Airbnb listings, right? And they just put like I don't know exactly how they managed it, but it was basically one house would be on multiple listings, and then just book it up for 60 days on one listing and then the next one. Right. People would do, what's that?
And then they would just link the calendars, right?
I'm not sure exactly how they managed it, but I do know that that's, people were doing stuff like that. People were also doing like, hey, we'll just do Airbnb until we reach our 60 days. And then we focus on all our platforms. They'd have a direct booking website. Okay. Some people would, what they would do is they would do like a mixed, a hybrid model, where they would have like, they would do like for 6 months of the year, they would have people in there as a midterm lease, like students or, construction workers or whatever it may be. And then they would do
short-term rentals anymore, right?
What's that?
So it wouldn't be considered short-term rentals because they'd be in there for longer than 30 days.
Exactly. But then like part of the year they would list it as a short-term rental.
Oh, okay.
Right. Just to get around like those limitations.
Right.
You know, if you have to live, look, if you find somebody who owns a home and that person is going to declare that they live in that unit and they have their own Airbnb account, like, I don't know what the enforcement is around it. Right. So that's another question that you have to ask yourself is like, okay, what's the enforcement like? But honestly, like if you ask me, and I can't decide this for you, but I would encourage you to think like, what do you want to build? What kind of business do you want to build? Right. And how do you want to operate in that gray zone where there's a lot of uncertainties and it's, you kind of have to go around the limitations? Or do you want to focus on markets where you don't have those challenges?
Right. And for me, the markets that don't have those challenges are farther away than what I would like.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my choices are be in the gray zone or go through a lot of hoops and hurdles in cities close to myself, or take the model to a vacation city like Big Bear, or the ones that are near me that have open regulations and have a lot more competition, but then at the same time operate with a full legal license.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, if I were in your shoes, I would go on Google Maps, or I would print out Google Maps.
Yeah.
And I would just like take a green marker, and I would just like color everything where it's legal. I would color it green.
Okay.
And then I would start doing some research. I would look at those markets, because you're talking about competition. Look, there's competition everywhere, right? But one thing that you have to recognize is that you're probably like a top 10%, top 5% operator, because most people don't go to masterminds. They don't go through coaching programs. They don't spend as much time, perfecting the experience, and most people just don't set the bar that high. So whatever market you go to, you got to trust in the fact that you have the knowledge, you have the skills, you have everything you need to succeed in that market, regardless of who else is there. That's where you need to be coming from, right? Then, and I'm not even talking about like building a vision and really dialing in your guest avatar, optimizing the experience. I mean, look at the business that we just bought. Like, the owners that were running it, they didn't really have any of that, right? I just interviewed somebody in Germany, right, who told me that he just took over a 6-unit property in a little village, and he said the only marketing they were doing, they had a vacancy sign on the road. Yeah. Right. So, look, there's opportunities for sure. But you have to make a choice. And this is something that you're not the only person that's dealing with this right now, because there's a lot of people in the bigger cities where there's either regulations in place or there's regulations coming. And and you have to make a decision, right? I personally, I prefer to build something sustainable, and I prefer to build it slower, because if you're going to markets that are further away from you, that's going to slow you down, right? It's harder to scale if you're in different markets and they're further away. It's easier to scale close to home. Right. But that's something that you kind of have to accept, right? You have to make a choice. You could focus on one market. You could totally focus on one market. It doesn't have to be like multiple markets around you, right? So I would look at the map and I would just say like, okay, what's a market that I really want to focus on? What's somewhere where I would like to be myself, where I can, where I can develop a vision, where I can develop a business where I think I can bring value to the community over the long term.
Yeah.
Where is that market? And that's what I would do.
Yeah, it makes me really. I mean, I put in my vision with Legends X, I put Los Angeles and San Diego, but those are two really regular, especially Los Angeles, very regulated places.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep those options open for my neighborhood, but I'm really going to try to focus on a couple cities in which we already have one or two listings there, and we have a permit and is much more open. So we have like a small team there. One of them in particular is a much better team than the other team. But I'm going to, I think I'm going to really expand it to not just here, but the two cities that are maybe a couple hours away from us that are not regulated, and we have a cleaner and a couple handymen there already.
What are those two locations?
Those are the Palm Springs area and Orange County.
Yeah. And
Orange County, like the beach areas of Orange County.
Yeah. So that's exactly. So if you already have like a couple listings and some people on the ground, like why would you make your life difficult and operate in the gray zone if you can pick one of those markets,
right?
And just, I mean, I'd much rather just dominate one market, right? Than to be spread out all over the place, unless you're trying to build something that like Eric and I are doing. Like we are building our vision is to build like eventually like a worldwide brand where we have 20 free wilds, and we want people to visit us in one location and love the experience and then say, hey, I want to go to another free wild. Right. So next time I'm traveling, I'm going to see where the other free wilds are, and then I want to stay there. Free
wild Jamaica or something.
Exactly. Right. So think of the Marriott, but then for short-term rental, small short-term rental communities.
Right.
So it obviously depends on what you're building, but if your vision is, okay, I want to manage like 30 to 50 units, and generate some income so that I can use that to invest in my own real estate, then I'd much rather focus on one market and dominate that market versus trying to operate semi-illegally in different areas all over the place.
It's going to be harder logistically because I have more people that I trust, that I'm close to in my city, but legally, regulatory wise, it's going to be much better. So I guess it's better to find those good people in those other markets, and like dominate like the smaller city like near Palm Springs. That already has a lot of competition as well. There's big players there. There's big players in any place where, as you know, that allows short-term rentals. So I'd be like going up against Vacasa, and we haven't gotten there, but I think, I'm sure we can touch on that next time. I'm sure there's a lot of strategies and pros to being like a smaller, high quality player rather than like a huge company that has like 10,000 units. Like McDonald's is like managing your property instead of like the small, like 5-star focused like company.
Yeah. Have you ever stayed at a Vacasa?
No, not yet. No.
Go stay at one, and then think again. Like if you think you can beat them, and
Was it no good? Which one did you go to?
I stayed at a few, but I've stayed at Airbnbs that are managed by bigger companies.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that they're doing a bad job or anything, but
Yeah.
I would not. If you pick a small market, I would not be worried about competing against larger players, or at least just because they're a larger player. I don't think that's a reason to be worried, because what we talked about before. I mean, people are more and more, especially in those smaller markets, people are more and more looking for trust and unique experience, a personal connection, and that's not always something that those bigger companies can provide.
Right. Yeah.
So I wouldn't be too worried about that. In fact, I know a lot of hosts. Well, a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but I do know several hosts who have taken over units from larger players because they were just not bringing the performance.
Yeah, they just. I assume that they just don't have the specialization to focus on one or two players in a small market when they've got like a million other units to think
exactly
about.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Well, cool, man. Well, I got some work to do, and but I learned a tremendous amount. I think I'm definitely gonna expand my vision now of the markets because of this conversation.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to see where you're gonna take this.
Yeah, we're just gonna go for it. That's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it. That's right. Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you being in our program, and look forward to hanging out with you sometime. Hopefully, I'll be in the US in the near future. So, and
Okay.
if not, come down to Panama City, man.
Okay, man. Either way, we're gonna, sit down and watch you drink bottles and bottles of whiskey, which is what I love watching.
That's right. All right, man. Thanks for being in the show again. This was part 2 of our kind of organic, friendly conversation about short-term rentals and about your business. So we'll stay in touch for sure. Before we wrap up, let people know how they can find your units.
Go to StayWithDave.com, please check it out, or check out my Instagram at StayWithDave. And please write a review and comment on this podcast as well.
For sure. Yeah, we've been getting some reviews. I'm excited. Good. Our listenership, or how do you say that, our audience is growing. So that's really excited to see.
How many of viewers do we have now for like podcast average? Do we know?
I mean, last time I looked, we had 135 reviews at a 4.7 rating on average. That's just Apple Podcast. The thing is with podcasting, there's 20 different platforms. Yeah. So everyone listens on a different platform, but I always look at the Apple Podcast. I think that's the main one.
Do you know how many viewers you have?
I mean, I know that we get about 20 to 25,000 downloads per month.
Okay, that's great.
But that's I can't see. I don't know how many people that is, because some people will listen to every podcast, some people will listen to a few. There's so. But yeah, we're growing, and after having a famous person like yourself on the podcast twice.
Just I'm telling you, David Golshan is on the podcast. Let's go, 300,000 views. Let's make this happen.
I'm expecting to double the amount of listeners pretty soon. So
let's do it. I'm ready.
All right, awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the show, and to the listeners, thank you for listening. And of course, Eric and I will be back on Friday with another episode. So we'll see you then.